How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another platformer tutorial. In this tutorial, we're going to be adding our boss. This is something that we've been working towards, and it's probably the last big thing we're adding. We have to add in our whole main menu system, pause system, and stuff like that, and our music management, SFX stuff. But for the game, this is our last big thing to add, and it's something that you don't see as often shown in Construct 2 tutorials. So I'm excited to go over this with you because we made it. We have so many things in this game already, and maybe it doesn't seem like we have a lot, but we really do. We have our signs that read off of XML. We have a lerp for our camera zoom. We have spikes that fall and deal damage. We have our coins. We have moving platforms. We have power-ups. We have enemies whose heads we can jump on and get health. We have our HUD. And now we're just going to add in our boss stuff before we get to all the main menu stuff that's not related to our gameplay. So to do this, what we're going to do is we're going to need some new layers. So the first thing I want to do here is I want to take our boss door. This is going to be our door. This is our boss explosion, and this is our boss. And I want to put the door on its own layer, and it needs to be underneath the tile map. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new layer. Push this all the way down underneath the tile map, and I'm going to right click this and name it to boss trigger and hit OK. Oops, I spelled trigger wrong. And this trigger is going to be very important because what it's supposed to do is actually start the boss battle and lock us in place. So what we're going to do with the trigger or the door is we're now going to right click, move to layer, boss trigger, and we're going to put this over here. So it's above our background and underneath our tile map. I'm going to put it like right, maybe I'll move it over just a little bit. I'm going to put it right there, which is awesome. It looks great. The next thing we're going to do on our boss trigger layer is we're going to double click and make a new sprite. Now this sprite, much like all of our other invisible sprites, is going to remain invisible. And I'm going to make it about this big. Maybe like this big will be good. What I want to call this sprite is my object boss trigger. Now this is what's going to happen. This will be invisible. And actually, you know what? We're going to have to put this. You know what? No, we can leave this as, we can leave them on the same layer. What we're going to do is we're going to take the boss door and we're going to make it initial visibility to invisible. That way you can't see it until you hit this. And when you hit this, so let's move this over a pixel or an entire cell there, just so we can actually give us some space. When you collide with this, this is going to actually slam down on you, and then this is going to wait and then call the boss to spawn. Now we're not actually going to leave the boss in there, he's just going to spawn. Okay, so now that we have that, let's actually add some collision for our trigger. Let's go to our event sheet here. And our AI is important because we're pretty much going to use the same AI, but we're going to do some additions to it for the boss, specifically for the boss. All right, so in our pause menu, what we're going to do is we're going to hit B, and we're going to say if our player collides with our boss door trigger. So now we got to find it in here. Boss door trigger, where are you? Boss trigger. That's fine. Then what we want to do here is immediately we want to have it shake the screen. And we want to shake the screen more violently than we have in the past. So let's go to our enemy AI. Let's grab our screen shake function and copy it. And let's go back here and hit paste. And when I mean more violently, I mean the magnitude needs to be greater and for longer. So to do this, I'm going to put this to 14 and I'm going to hold it for an entire second. So put it to 1. Now that's going to be crazy. Then what I want to do is I actually want to set up the boss health bar. So this is where our second layer is going to be important. So let's lock our boss trigger and let's lock all of these layers. Let's make a new layer and let's put this underneath the HUD. And let's call this boss health. And let's take our boss health. Actually, you know what? We have to unlock our entities layer and grab these and now move these to our boss health layer. And on our boss health layer, let's put, well, we need to actually hide our HUD. No, just our conversation. And just so I can see and just so you can see everything else, we need to see the dotted line here. Let's put this right there. And let's take our health, which we've already put the origin point to the left, and let's line it up as best as we can. If you have to use the arrow keys, you can. It's really okay. Let's put this like this. Perfect. And then what I want to do is I want to right click and move the Z order to the bottom of the layer so it's underneath the glass casing and looks like this. Now it might not be perfect, so I might need to take the glass casing and move it over a little bit, but let's see. So now when I hit play, if I put all these layers back, you're going to see that exact right there. It's actually going to always be up. So let's see how that looks. Okay, that looks perfectly fine. I think it's matched okay. There are other ways to make it match perfectly, but for right now, for our purposes, this works. What I need to do is the same thing that we do for our HUD layer and for our conversation layer. We need to set the scale rate to 0 so it doesn't change. We need to put our parallax down to 0 and 0 and hit OK. And let's hit save. And now let's hit play. So now you should see this trigger and follow you. So this is what it's going to look like when we actually collide with the trigger and the boss health layer actually is visible. But why would we have it visible when we don't need it to be? So let's go to our event sheet. Let's go to our start of layout. And just like we have our combo to be invisible, let's copy and paste and set this to be boss health. And hit OK. Cool. So now that we have our boss health invisible, let's copy this line and go all the way down here. And after our screen shake, let's hit paste and let's turn this to visible. So now both of those things should be working. Now there's going to be a few sounds that we're going to need to add, but this should be good. All right, so let's go back to our boss trigger here. Let's unlock this. And on our boss door, let's add a behavior of solid. Now usually what we do for these kind of things is we don't have any solid behavior just so nothing gets stuck that doesn't need to be stuck. So what we're going to do for this is we're actually going to have it be disabled from the start. So let's hit save, let's go back, and then what we want to do is we want to enable it. So let's add the action to our boss door, set enabled, and hit OK. Cool. After we enable it, this is when we want to wait because we're getting ready to spawn our boss. So what we're going to do here, and this is actually something that I timed out, we're going to wait for 1.5 seconds. And after we do that, we're going to call the same big screen shake. So now what's going on here is this. It's almost going to be like 3 precursor shakes, and that's going to be like a rumble, like something's happening. So we have a huge shake, then we have these two things happen where the door is visible, the health is visible. Oh, you know what? We actually need to set that to visible, don't we? Let's do that. Object boss door. Where is it? Here it is. Set visibility. Because we made it invisible. So we're going to set that to visible. Then we're going to set it to become a solid. So now our player can't get out. He's trapped. Then we're going to wait. And then we're going to call a screen shake again. So it's kind of like 3 stages. This is the first stage where we actually have the health show. And then we have this show. Then we wait for the second stage. And in the second stage, what we want to have happen is we want to start a timer. So let's go to our boss. Let's go to our boss guy here. He might be on the entities layer, which is fine. And let's actually start to add some behaviors to our boss. The first one we're going to add is a timer behavior. The second one we're going to add is our platform behavior. The third is going to be a flash behavior. The fourth is going to be a destroy outside layout behavior. So we're going to get into this in a second, but for right now you can turn the default controls off for the platform behavior, and let's make it a little bit faster than the enemy, but not faster than the player. I think everything else is fine for right now. What we really want to use is the timer. Actually, you know what? No, let's take the timer off of the boss. Since we're going to actually be creating this object, we don't need the timer on here. Let's get rid of the timer there. Let's put the timer on the player if we didn't already. We might have done that in the setup. I don't remember. We did. Okay, cool. So let's use the timer on the player to actually control the boss. Since the player will be on the screen or on the layout, it has control. And since we're creating the object, that's going to be why we're going to use the player's timer. So what we want to do is after we call our screen shake, we want to start that timer. So let's go to our player. And let's start the player timer down here. Let's give it a name of boss, or you could call it spawn boss or whatever you want to call it. And let's also wait 1.5 seconds. So now everything's timed out to be 1.5 seconds, and that's going to be just enough time to give the user a sense of, uh-oh, something big is coming. Okay, so now that this is waiting, this is going to count down once. This is not going to be on regularly. So this is going to say one time I'm going to count down from 1.5 seconds and then something's going to happen. So let's group all this together and let's call this our trigger boss. And let's put this in here. All right, now that that's in there, let's hit B on the group and let's double click on the new blank sub event, go to our player, scroll down to our timer, and on timer boss. So when that 1.5 seconds is up, what's going to happen is we are going to spawn our boss. So to do this, let's think how we want to do this. We can use a number of things to actually spawn the boss, but one of the things I think I'm going to use here, I'm going to piggyback off of the trigger. I think I'm going to use the trigger because we need to get rid of the trigger that we have just created. So to do that, and even if we don't do that, we can always have something else spawn the boss. The player could even spawn the boss. It's just a matter of getting something to create the boss on the screen. So what we're going to do is we're going to have our, where is our boss trigger? We're going to have this type in spawn another object. We're going to have it spawn our boss. Now on the layer, we can actually just do entities. It doesn't matter. We don't have to have our own boss layer. You could if you want to. And then what we're going to do is we're going to destroy this trigger because we no longer need it. As soon as that boss is alive and created, we can get rid of the boss trigger. So let's put in a destroy action. Then what we want to do, and this is going to be the interesting part, is we want to actually set the boss direction and we want to actually set the group to be active. So let's do this. Let's go to our pause menu. Let's hit B. And what we want to do here is, just for right now, let's go to our boss is moving. Let's just do that. What we're going to do here is we're going to group this. We're going to call this our boss AI, and we're going to tick off active on start because this is not going to be active until we tell it to. So right here on our timer, this is where we're going to set that group to active. So let's go system, group active, boss AI. So now that'll be activated, and now we'll actually have control for our boss. Now let's go to our object boss and let's add the instance variable of direction. Let's make it a text value type, and let's actually set the direction here on the end of the timer. So just like we did for our enemy, we're going to go to our boss. We're going to set the value of choose between left and right. And I'm only going to give it 2 chances here because it's the boss, it's big, and it's in a small area. So we're going to have it choose between left and right, and now we're just going to set it up just the way we did everything else. So we have some other stuff that we're going to add with the music and the sounds, but for right now, everything should be pretty good. So let's go and copy over our enemy AI. Let's get all of this, minus the onCreated. So if we want to just grab everything, you can hold down Control. We can copy this down here, and we can go to our boss, and we can hit paste. And now what we need to do, let's get rid of our enemy colliders. And what we need to do is we need to replace all of the object enemies to be with the object boss. So select everything here, hit R on the keyboard, and it should find the boss object because it has the same exact parameters. The object boss should have the same animation, and it should have the same behavior. So let's do the same thing for over here, and hit R and replace everything with the boss. Awesome. So now we have our boss set up and ready to go, which is really cool. But we need to add a few more things. So the first thing I want to add is I want to go to the boss object, add an instance variable, and this is going to be a Boolean. So this is going to be a true or false statement. And I want to call this the target and hit OK. The target is going to be if it actually sees the player or not. And if it sees the player, what's going to happen? So to do that, we need to actually add one more behavior to our boss, and that is the line of sight behavior. So let's add the line of sight behavior to our boss. And this is actually going to look 360 degrees and find our player. We can leave everything the same. And what we're going to do now in our boss AI is actually, you know what? We can get rid of our initial is moving here, and we can actually start to group our boss AI because we have a few more things to add here. Let's call this our boss direction. And let's put everything into our boss direction. And in there, what we want to do is add a new blank sub event, double click, and we want to find out if the boss has a line of sight to the object player. And if it does, we're going to set target to true. So let's say object, not object enemy, object boss, set boolean target to true. And we should be good there, but no, I think we're fine there. If you wanted to actually add anything else, you could. Like, you could tell it to do other things when it has the line of sight. Like, you can make it do some crazy stuff and make it shake the screen, but since it's such a small space, you don't want to shake the screen that much because it'll constantly have a line of sight to the player. So if it has the target true, that's what we need to check for. So let's make a new sub event. Let's go to our boss and let's compare the boolean. So if target is true, what is going to happen? Well, we're going to hit B to make a sub event, and we're going to say system every X seconds. And what we want to do here is every integer random, let's go for 2 to 3 seconds should be good. And what this is doing is it's going to pick a random number between 2 and 3, including float values. So what I had to do to make sure that it's just going every 2 or 3 seconds is put an integer function in front of it. So now this is saying every 2 or 3 seconds, not every 2.5 or every 2.8 seconds, and hit OK. So every 2 to 3 seconds, what's going to happen is this boss, so I can copy this right here where we simulate pressing right, is going to jump. And that's what I want it to do for when we actually have the line of sight to the player, because that's different for this game. This game, we haven't had jumping AI. So this is going to be the extent of our AI, and it's actually going to be a lot more fun than you think, because this is how the classic games did it. Okay, so that was a lot. Let's see how this works. And actually, you know what? To make this go faster, let's take our player and let's move it down here. And let's take it through everything, make sure that everything will actually collide properly, and make sure that we can get away with everything else that we might need. So the first thing we notice here is we absolutely need to fix that collision. So we'll do that next. And we'll let this go. Oh, there we go. Our second screen check went off, and there we go. There's our boss. But you'll notice that it's only going to flip directions when it hits the wall. But every 2-3 seconds, it should jump like it does right there, which is really cool. One of the things that is also really important that you'll notice here is we absolutely need to have our power up to get on top of his head, which is a really good incentive if you get stuck here the first time you play this and you're just like, oh man, I can't reach those platforms up there and I can't jump on the boss's head, therefore I'm going to lose. So it's also really good gameplay mechanics to actually have things that you need to collect help defeat the boss. But the first thing we need to do here is we need to fix this collision. So let's take a break from coding and let's do that. Let's go to our tile map object here. Let's unlock our tile map and lock everything else. And let's actually look at this tile here. So this tile should be this tile, I believe, or no, it's this tile. So let's double click on this and let's move this down just like we've been doing. Let's move the Y position of this point down to 5. And let's move the Y position of this point down to 5 and hit OK. So that solves that problem because that'll be the same as over here. I mean, we could make it 4, or no, we could make it 6 actually, so we can make it a little bit. Let's see how that looks actually. I'm not sure if we should make that smaller or not. Yeah, let's make it a little smaller because it doesn't look like we're actually on top of it. So let's double click on this. And when you highlight, that's when you can see the collision box if you've set it to be something else. Like if I put my mouse over here, you can actually see what it is. So let's zoom in here and let's increase this. Oops, let's increase this point to, let's try 7. No, let's go to 8. I like the number 8. Let's go to 8 and hit OK. And that's going to make for a very interesting collision over here, but I think we got this. So what we're going to do is check this out. Okay, so that looks a lot better. I think we're actually on the floor here now, at least what the floor was intended to be. Our boss has been created, our screen shake was crazy, and we're pretty good to go there. So let's actually double click on this tile here. Let me get the normal selection tool. Or actually, let's make sure that this is the right tile. It is not. It's, which tile is it? Is it this tile? It's this tile. Aha. So what we need to do here is we need to put this to 8. So let's move this all the way down to 8. But what we actually really need is we need to add a point put this over here. We need to put this point to 8. That's what needs to be at 8. And we need to put this point to 5. So we had to add a point here just to get the extra collision that we needed. This needs to go down to 5 as well, up to 5. And that should create a more smooth collision here. So if I were to actually move this over, it's actually an object, isn't it? So let me figure out where that object is on. It should be on the spikes layer. So if I take this object, it is not on the spikes layer, or I locked it, and I just kind of move it over a little bit, that collision, you can already tell, is actually going to be seamless, and you'll actually have a really nice time walking up that mountain there. Let me put this like this, and let me hit save, and let's hit play, and let's see how this looks. So there you go. You can actually see it kind of walk up the collision pretty well, and that's really powerful, and I really like having that control over the tile map. So there we go. Now our boss is triggering, and everything is working pretty well. All right, so now that we have that, let's get back to programming the boss. All right, so now that we have our collision, I realize that there are other collision boxes that we should probably fix a little bit before we get back to coding the boss, and it'll take 2 seconds here. We just need to move this collision over a little bit. I don't want to get our player stuck, which is something that might happen if we move this over, but we should be okay moving it over just a few pixels. I want to move it like right there, so I guess we'll put this down to 30, this point to 30, and this point to 30. Let's see, that way it just wall slides a little bit nicer, at least in theory. And other things that you find, like corner pieces, those don't matter. These don't matter. It's just like the bigger ones that you would actually interact with. Things that might get stuck would be corner pieces for the most part. Stuff like right here might get a little stuck if you had this not being perfectly aligned, but it is. So just keep in mind that that can happen, and avoid, if you do have that question, if that popped up where you're like, oh man, something's happening with the collision, it's probably because it's off by a pixel or something. So make sure you're just moving it by the point. All right, but let's get back to programming our boss. So what we need to do here is we need to go to our event sheet, and we're going to set up a new group, and this is going to be when the boss collides with the player. So let's make sure that this is in the boss AI group. Let's hit B. And what this is going to be is our boss player collision. So if it collides with the player, or just in general, if it overlaps with the player, I think that's what we're going to end up doing. Just like we did with our enemy, this is going to hurt the player. So to do this, we're going to double click on this blank sub event. We're going to go to our boss. We're going to find out if it's overlapping our player. So we're going to find our player and find out if it's overlapping the player. But there's some additional checks that we need to do. If it's overlapping the player is the trigger, but we also need to make a few more and statements. So let's hit C. Let's find out if the player is not falling. We want to make sure, so we have to find that it is falling, and then we have to hit I on the keyboard. We want to make sure that we are not coming off of an attack and that he can hurt us, because when we attack him, we're going to jump on his head, and therefore we want to make sure that he can't hurt us after we attack him. So this is just an additional check. The next thing is we want to make sure that we are not flashing. So let's go object player is flashing, hit I to invert, so now it's not flashing. And then we want to make sure that the boss itself is not flashing. So let's go to our boss, is flashing and not flashing. And now we're ready. If all of these are true, if all of these are met, now we're ready to actually hurt our player. So to do so, we're actually going to trigger it once. So let's hit B and let's go system, trigger once while true. We're going to call the player help function. So I can just copy this and paste it right there. Then what we're going to do here is we're going to make a note to play player hurt sound. Oops. And then we are going to flash our player. So let's go player flash. And we're going to do the same thing, 0.05, 0.05. Let's put the duration for 1.5 seconds of immunity. So now in that 1.5 seconds, the enemy or the boss cannot hurt us again. And finally, let's call a bigger screen shake function. So let's add the action to go plugins function, call function, screen shake function, add parameter. let's say a magnitude of 6 for 3 seconds. And that's going to call a medium function or a medium screen shake, which will look nice because we actually were injured. So that's just how it'll be. So let's group all this together. Let's grab our event and hit G. And let's call this boss player collision. And let's put everything in there, including the comments. And there we go. Now let's make the opposite. Let's make it so when our player collides with the boss. So to do this, let's hit B on the boss AI. And let's zoom in a little bit so you can see just a little bit better. Let's say if what do we want to do here? We want to find out if we're colliding with the boss. So let's go if the player collides with the boss and the player is not flashing. We don't care if the boss is flashing, although the additional checks never hurt, is flashing. So if we're not flashing, then like we did with our enemy, we want to find out if our Y position is less than the boss's Y position. So instead of comparing two values, which is a perfectly fine way of doing it, we can also do it another way. We can say if our players compare Y, so let's go compare Y, is less than the object boss.y, then what's going to happen? Well, the boss is going to flash, and we're going to have it flash for pretty much the same duration as always, 0.05 on and off time. And let's make it last less than a second. Let's say it only gets 8 seconds of invulnerability. And then we're going to call our screen shake function. So let's copy this and let's hit paste. And let's think what else we want to do here. Let's actually increase that to be 6 and match our other one. Then we're going to have to program in the boss health. So let's do that. Let's go to our boss. Let's add an instance variable called health. And let's actually set this up. So I'm going to leave the number at 0 right now, but what we need to actually tie our health bar to is the width. So let's get our width of this object. Where is it? That's the casing. We want the actual health bar. Object boss health. Here it is. So let's go and resize this and let's find out how long it is in pixels. The width, it's 612. So that's how much health our boss is going to have. If you wanted to make this smaller, if you wanted to make this 100, you could squish it all you want. You could put this on the top. It doesn't matter where you place the health bar. It doesn't matter what width the health bar is. Since I wanted it to be the window size or close to it, it's 612, which means on our object boss, I'm going to set the initial value to be 612. And the reason for this is I'm going to go all the way up to the every tick. And I'm going to set the width of that health bar. So let's find object boss health. I'm going to type in set width. And I'm going to tie it to that instance variable. So I'm going to go object boss dot health. Now the width is equal to whatever number I put here. So if I put 100, that's what it's going to equal, and it's not going to look like this. And I want it to look like this. So it's going to be 612. So now that we have that tied in there, when we actually attack the boss here, we're actually going to have to pick how much health we want to subtract. And 612 is not your average number. So what we can do is you can pick a random number to subtract. You can make it do a bunch of things. So let's go here, subtract from health. You could subtract, the same thing we did, int random, have it pick a number between 10 and 100. If you do anything like 10 and 50, it'll take a really long time to kill that boss. And from experience, I know if you have an enemy that takes forever to kill, even if you think it's a good idea that it takes so many times to kill, it's just not fun. So having it lose 10 health and 50 health is going to be really painful. You want to aim for something between 50 and 75, I would say. I'm going to just put it to 75 for example purposes here, just because we'll kill it faster. But if you wanted to really randomize it, you could do, choose, maybe you wanted to do 50 damage one time, maybe you wanted to do 50 again, maybe you wanted to do 70, 75. That'll give you more control. Or you could do int random 50 to 70. Doesn't really matter that much, but you will kill it faster. So let's just put this to 75. So that way we know that we're doing 75 damage every single time. Okay, so we have one more thing to do, but let's group this together and let's call this our boss let's call this our boss hurt collision, just because this is where the boss actually dies. We have one more thing to put here, so let's hit B, and let's move this to the top. What we want to find out, since we're setting the boss to flash, we want to go to our boss, and we want to find out if it's flashing. If it's flashing, this is where we want to trigger our sound, and this is the new feedback that I'm showing you. So before I showed you how to do feedback from the player when it jumps on the enemy's head and it bounces up, I'm going to show you different feedback here that you can add to your game. So we're going to make a note to add boss hurt sound. And what we're going to do is we're going to actually add the action to our boss to simulate the control of jump. So when you actually jump on its head, it's going to jump in pain. And that's the whole point. So now that we have our hurt collision, we actually need a way to die. So let's hit B on the keyboard here. And let's actually double click, go to our boss. And let's compare the instance variable of health. And we want to find out if it is less than or equal to 0. Because this is different from our player health, where our player health is 0 is 100%. We're actually subtracting from 620. So if it's less than or equal to 0, we are ready to die. So let's create our death event here. Let's add the action to our boss to destroy. And then what we want to do here is we actually want to explode. So let's actually spawn in the explosion. And you'll notice here that, code is red from top to bottom. So when this destroys, you might think that you can't actually spawn something, but since it's happening so fast, you still have room to actually have the boss spawn its own explosion. So let's spawn the other objects. Let's find our object explosion, which we need to set up. And we'll set that up in a second, as long as I remember to do that. Let's go to, what layer do we want it to be on? Entities is fine, and hit OK. And then what we want to do is we want to wait 3 seconds, something like that. Let's wait half a second. And then we're going to go to a different layout here. So what's going to happen is we're actually going to go to our win death layout. So we need to add more things to this. So I need to make a reminder here. Now this is something new. I'm going to hit Control G. I'm going to bookmark this because I want to make sure that I have these reminders set. And I should actually be doing this for every single sound that I need here. So when I go back, I know where I need to add sound. I know I'm going to need to add sound here. And where else am I going to need to add sound? There's probably a lot of places I'm going to need to add sound here and here. And the zoom could use sound, but we don't have any zoom sounds that I'm providing. So if you want to actually add sounds, you could do that. We're going to add our actual sign sound, coin sound. We're going to have to add some arrow sound. Maybe we should just write sound. Control G, by the way, to actually add the bookmark. There will be a spike sound. Our player hurt sound needs to go here. Spike death sound needs to go there. Oh, there's so many sounds we're going to have to add. The wall jump sound, the power up sound. All right, you get the point. Wall jump, power up, hit Control G. My point to this is I want to show you one thing here that we haven't really discussed. It's the bookmarks bar. So now that I bookmarked everything, I know where I need to go. I can just double click on this and it'll take me to where I need to add the sound. But I have a cool way that we're actually going to do our sound. So this should actually be fairly easy, and it's easier now that I actually have this bookmark. So we're going to go to the win death layout here, and we don't have that layout created yet, but it wouldn't be a shame to create it now. So let's actually do that. Let's add the new layout. Let's add an event sheet with it. Let's call this win death layout. Now I know we haven't organized our event sheets, and we've stayed pretty neutral here with just one layout and one event sheet. So we'll get to that in a second here, but we can call our event sheet win death event, just so we have this here. And what we can do is we can wait, and then we can say system, go to layout, win death layout, and hit OK. Okay, what else do we need to do? Let's think. We're gonna have some, okay, I had set it up before, but we didn't actually implement it. Let's group this together. Let's call this our boss death, now that we've implemented our boss death. And we can actually test this, but before we test this, I want to add one more thing, and I actually really like this. So I had spoken earlier about how it's only moving left and right when it actually hits the wall. And that's absolutely fine, but we want one more additional check for that. We want to say if the boss is on the floor. So if the boss is on the floor, and then what we're going to do here is we're going to say, we're going to hit, no, we don't need to do that. What do we need to do? Not if the boss is on the floor. That's wrong. What we need to do is we need to mirror it. So let's go to our boss. We need to compare the X. Let's go compare X. And what we want to find out is if it's greater than object player.x. So similar to how we do our jump or how we jump onto something's head, we're finding out if the boss is right there. We're finding out if, pretend this enemy is, okay, hold on. I'll just grab the player. We're finding out if this X position is greater than this position. So as soon as it like goes left and right here, that's when it's going to trigger. So let's put this back to where I had it. That was my great example. And this will make sense in a second here. What's going to happen is if it's greater than, we're going to say boss mirror. And that's actually going to continue to look at the player as if it was actually tracking the player. We're going to select this event. We're going to hit X on the keyboard, and that's going to automatically create an else statement for you, which is really useful. We're going to control drag this down, double click, and we're going to say not mirrored, else it's not mirrored. So that should be pretty self-explanatory. Let's call this our boss mirrored group. And let's put this in here. Now you can do this for all of your AI and everything else that we did. You can go crazy with all the group and the naming conventions. Anything you want to do, feel free to do that. Let me make one more note here to add boss jump sound and boss land sound. And we're going to do some cool things with that as well. Actually, you know what? Did we do that already? I don't think we did. Let's see. When the boss, oh, the zoom got a little messed up there. When the boss jumps, we don't have anything for when the boss lands. So let's hit B in our boss direction. Let's say when the boss landed, let's go down here. There's going to be a sound that we're going to want to play, but we're also going to want to shake the screen a lot. This is actually going to be really cool. So let's say, let's take the big screen shake and let's paste it in here, but let's actually turn that down a whole lot. Let's put this to 8. For 0.4 seconds. So this is when he lands after the jump. Now usually what you want to do here is you want to make sure that that entity is on the screen. So you would add an additional check to say if the boss screen is on the screen, and that way if for some reason you were over here and there was no sign of the boss and the boss was over here, it wouldn't shake when it jumped up and down. And that's something that I like to put in. This is a very important check for if you had jumping AI. You could very easily add in a small jump for our little enemies here, and that's something that you would want to have. You would want to have the screen shake just a little bit, but only if the enemy is actually in the window. So it's something that you might want to add in, but now that we have that, we can actually add in that sound, or we can put that sound in as well. So let's hit save, and let's hit play. And let's see everything work here. So let's go like this. And there we go. All right. So I jumped on his head and he lost some health. He overlapped me. I just realized I need to get this this power up here so I can actually beat him. But let's see what happens when I die again, because it's going to be easier to test. But just for example purposes. Okay, let's see. Example purpose, he just killed me and we restarted the layout, but let's try this again, because that's not what actually, that is what's supposed to happen. So, okay, I can kind of jump over his head. So there we go. I need to win. So let's see if I can win without the power up. It's going to be a lot easier with the power up because I can actually, can't even time this jump right. I can actually jump higher. Oh, I missed it. Keep missing. All right, we might have to get the power up. But you can see that it's flipping when I look the other way. All right, hold on. I'm going to get that power up. That way I can actually defeat him, and we can test to make sure it goes to the win death layout. But you can see that it's actually mirroring if the X is greater, which is exactly what we've wanted. Now I can do cool wall slides, and I can see here that the wall slide the collision may be off a little bit, but the wall slide here should be a lot better, so that might be something that I would want to fix. And it is a lot better. It looks really nice. And jump. That was pretty well timed. Yes, I heard about the boss. Let's go to the boss. Run, 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 run. Amazing screen shake. And here comes the boss. I can now jump on his head. You can see the feedback from him. And with sound, this feedback will be a whole lot better. And you can add more feedback. And that's really the secret to a lot of these games is what is giving the proper feedback, what is actually making the right sound, and what is actually giving that extra motion. And that really is an important fact when it comes to making your first game. So let's add this. He's almost dead. Look at this. And bam, explosion. And we go to our win-death layout. Perfect. So everything worked first try. I'm extremely excited about that. So now we have our boss. The last thing I want to do here is I want to actually fix our explosion particle effect before I forget to do that. And after we have that, I think we are good to go on the boss, and we can start to do some of the menu stuff and adding in all the sounds. The sounds is what's going to bring this together. The menu management system is just, wrapping all of this up into a nice little bow here where you actually have a menu management system to go by and actually rely upon because it's such an easy system to implement. It looks nice and it actually functions well. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to tweak some parameters that I found online. So mess around with particles. I mean, really, particle effects are just something that you're just going to have to get used to. And they can be really powerful if you have the right drawing. If you had a nice smoke particle or if you had something like that, everything should look really nice. So let's actually go to this particle effect here and let's think what we want to do, what we want to change. Let's make this grow. We want to make the speed randomizer here grow. Let's see what else we need. I'm trying to think what else we might need to have. Everything else might be good. We might need to set the angle though. I think the angle is what's really important here. Let's think. The angle should be at 0, 50, 60. Let's put this to one shot, and let's put this to 360 degrees. And you can put a rate. Let's put the rate up. Let's try 80. And that should be good. I think that'll actually explode outwards now that the cone is at 360 degrees. So let's quickly grab our power up, let's also fix that collision. I got some health back from that enemy, which is now coming in handy now that I'm actually dying more often. We're going to fix that collision in a second here. Here comes the boss. So we have our second screen shake, which is our warning. And then here comes our third screen shake. So you can see when he actually lands the screen shake, bam, like that. And that really actually adds to it and makes this feel like a really nice fight. And remember, we already programmed for other inputs. So this is also a really fun battle with the gamepad, which is also just a nice bonus. So there we go. Let's destroy him that way. Come on. I'm going to win. Yes. All right. So that was a really cool explosion. And let's go to our boss death, and we can make this, last for a second so we can actually see the explosion fade out. So we got more to add, and now we are in the home stretch. Thank you so much for watching all of these videos. It really means a lot to me that you are enjoying this. I really hope that you're enjoying this. This was a whole lot of fun, and it was a lot of work, but it really is worth it, and I hope that from here on in, your games will just really benefit from this. So thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next